we'll do it. We'll do it tomorrow.
All right, I think here is a,
Yes, it is. It is, and so that's gonna need to go back up on your thing. And then you can pass me the cord if you don't mind. I'm gonna unmute you. Can you now unmute this one?
I'm unmuted. Wow, what a faith you have.
Gita didn't get my email. I don't know. I did something wrong about bringing meals for Swami. Gita. Yeah, I sent it to her. Gita Narada. Oh yes, I sent it last night. Or list. I can't resend. Okay. Should I make a salad tomorrow night to go with dosa? Or
I don't think she's going to make salad though.
Nothing is necessary with dosa.
Yeah, if you make salad.
okay. Now you have Swayam and Draguna and Haima and Jangam.
No, Haima's there too. Hello, Haima. Swayam.
Swami see.
Yes, I can only see the camera. I can't see you.
Oh, really?
It's because of the way he's set up.
He won't be distracted looking at you all on the camera. He'll talk to us that are here in person.
Nice managed. Nicely managed, Jyoti.
Thank you, Shaker. Shaker.
Yes, if any of them has a question, just throw something at me. Let me know.
Oh. Can you look and tell me when this is?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, this is good, 7:29. I have to have everything done 15 minutes before it starts. I'll lead us in the prayer if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Lynette is also here now from South Dakota.
Ah, Lynette. She came to Colorado last week.
Oh, what happened? I was telling someone who was here. It's 7:30. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
May the divine being
Look over us lovingly as a mother and father.
May the divine being
Support and nourish us as a mother and father.
May we have the strength and skill
To study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.
Be unto us all. All right. So we're going to jump into the Katha Upanishad. I guess they really don't know where the name came from, but it's one of the longer Upanishads. And it's one that I've really enjoyed. Interestingly enough, when I first read it, well, I was going to say I knew nothing, but that's pretty much currently also. But I read it for the first time with no idea really of the Vedanta and what was going on. And so a lot of ideas came from that because I would just sit. I didn't know Sanskrit at the time and didn't have any of those other study tools available. And so I just kind of sat and ruminated, kind of let it roll around in my head, and came up with a lot of things that were very interesting to me. And when Jyoti asked me to pick something to do a class on through the 2 weeks, I thought this would be a very fun one to do in an informal kind of way, just as devotees to kind of be inspired, because it comes right into our living room. And I'll share some of these ideas with you. I've got some funny memories about having given a class on this before, but I won't I won't mention it. I was called a fool by a senior Swami, so it's like, oops. Not my favorite moment in life. But so we'll just start. We'll just jump in and let these things come forward as they do. So Vajrasravasa, desiring rewards, performed the Vishvajit sacrifice, in which he gave away all his property. He had a son named Nachiketa. All right, so there's a couple of things in here just to kind of pull us into the ball game. This whole notion of Vajrasravasa doing this sacrifice, he's going to set up one half of reality, and that is those of us who are caught up in this world doing things for results. Right here, the example is a sacrifice in which he gives up everything. I see that, or saw that at the time, as really you and I living life here on this planet. Ultimately, we have to give up everything. I mean, ultimately, death takes it all from us anyway. So ultimately, we lose everything, which is an important point to keep in mind for a second. But also, everything that we do for a result. We do it to get something. We give up our day and go to the office in order to get that paycheck. We whatever, anything that we do in this world, we want a return on it. And if we don't get that return, we lose interest in it. We don't do anything with it. And so we've got Vajrasravasa here desiring rewards as he's performing his sacrifice and getting himself into trouble a little bit here, because we say that when the gifts were being distributed, faith, or Shraddha, entered into the heart of Nachiketa, who was still a boy. He said to himself, "Joyless surely are the worlds to which he goes, who gives away cows no longer able to drink, to eat, to give milk, or to calve." Right? And at this one here, I read that, I was thinking, well, what is he talking about? Did his father just give his bad cows? Did he not give anything? That was my first assumption, that this was a criticism of the quality of the sacrifice that his father made. And two things came to me when I thought that's very odd for an Indian son to criticize his father's sacrifice. I thought, that doesn't sound like a normal thing at all with what I know of Indians and their families and their respect, which is above and beyond everything. And that a child would never say that in a judgment about his father's sacrifice. And furthermore, it says in the very first verse that he gave away all of his property, that the requirement of this sacrifice was everything. Well, if somebody is given everything, you can't criticize them for the quality of what they're giving away, right? I mean, what else could you do? That's all you've got. It's everything you've got. And so it's very interesting to me that trying to figure out exactly what happened, or what is this criticism that is coming from Nachiketas, the son of the man making his offering of everything that he has. And he says to his father, not yet, that comes along here. Where is it? Faith entered into the heart of Nachiketas. And I was wondering, what does that mean, that faith entered into the heart of Nachiketas? Faith was that knowledge of what is real. Faith can be talked about in several ways. In one sense, faith is knowing or trusting things that we couldn't have learned from the experience of life, but had to be brought in with us when we came. You think, well, what in the world are you talking about? Well, one is this notion of immortality. If our mind really was just a vacuum of the material world, just went around vacuuming up all of this information here, we would never have the notion of immortality. There is nothing that would teach us immortality. There's nothing that would teach us about infinity. There's no example of infinity in this world. And yet we're very comfortable with both of those, our immortality, our infinity, any ideal. There is nothing in this world that could have taught us of ideals, a perfect and unconditioned love. Where would that idea come from? We don't have any such thing to learn from. And so there's quite a few things that we bring into this world with us. And they tend to be the things that we try to recreate in this world. When we forget our divine nature, we come into the world and we identify with the finite, with this body and with this mind. And where do our desires come from? Our desires come from this innate knowledge, this intuitive knowledge that we're something more, that somehow we were something and have become less of something. Vivekananda says that was the beginning, or that all the world's religions teach this, that at one point we were whole and complete and new, and at some point we became degraded, forgot our nature. And so believing ourselves to be this thing that has limits, this thing that has an expiration date on it, a body and a mind, the first thing the self wants to do, having forgotten itself, is to recreate this intuitive knowledge of itself, this memory. And so you look at all of your desires and you'll see that they are expressions of qualities of the divine, as it were. That we try and get infinite amount of money. Why? For security, for power, for control. All the things that we left behind when we became two and forgot our oneness. The relationships, our quest for oneness, our quest for that perfect love, for that unqualified love, our name and fame, again, taking a security, in these things. And so all of our desires can be traced back to a notion of ourselves that we lost when we became, or thought ourselves to become, a body and a mind. And so faith is going back to that which you know to be true, but you can't demonstrate in this world. That I'm immortal, I'm ever free, I'll never die, I've never been born. All of these qualities that the sages have told us, our desires are born of those things through a trick of mind, as we try to recreate them or to find them, to find that old security that we once had, that old infinity, that old oneness, that old love that we had forgotten. So it's one idea that faith has entered into him, that he's seeing the reality of things. He's looking at the world around him, and he's looking at what his Father is doing. His Father is giving away everything that he wants or that he has in order to get something else, to get a different result, a bigger result, or some reward for that. And when he enters into this state of seeing the world as it is, he understands the absurdity of what his Father's trying to do. He's like, you're giving up everything in this world to get some favor from the divine, something in return from God. And he's like, what do you think you have to give in this world? Nothing is yours, right? Everything is rented here. Nothing is owned. Your house is yours for a few years, and then you move out willingly or not, and someone else moves in, or you give it to somebody else. So everything in this world is borrowed. You come in with nothing, you leave with nothing. And so this notion that we're in this world to get something, we talked about that this morning in class, that there's nothing here to get. There's nothing here that you can take. And so that is what Nachiketas is seeing. He says, joyless surely are the worlds to which one goes who gives away cows, no longer able to drink, because that's inevitable. No longer able to eat, that's also inevitable. No longer to give milk or to calve. All of those things are inevitable. They are the life cycle of all of us and everything in this universe. And so Nachiketas is seeing this, and he's looking at it, he's wondering, well, what is all of this? And do I not? Here in this next verse, he says to his father, Father, to whom will you give me? He said this a second and a third time. Then his father replied, unto death I will give you. Well, when I first read this, there was a couple of things here that stuck out to me. First of all, he is a possession of his father's, right? His father does, in a sense, own him. And so he sees him part of the sacrifice, sees himself as part of the sacrifice. You have to give up me also, Father. You know, how are you going to do that? Are you going to give me away? What are you going to do? And his father, of course, says, well, unto death I will give you. Now, initially I read somewhere that this was kind of a curse, you know, that his father was angry with him and was cursing him for it. And since while I was reading it, that really wasn't the mood I was sensing, you know, that I was seeing that Nachiketas was seeing something super real. He was getting a perspective based on faith. He was looking at this thing in a spiritual light. And he was drawing his attention to his father. Father, I'm also a possession of yours. How are you going to get rid of me? And I think his father was also responding in a way, in a sense, with the same faith. I gave you life, and with that came your death. So I've given you to death. You know, so in this broader terms of things, this broader seeing of things, he said that I give you both, and that's how I'm going to lose you, is to death as well. And so Nachiketas thinks, okay, so he's going to give me to death. And so he considers himself as a sacrifice, just like he had considered the cows just now and the other things his father was offering. He says to him, well, among all of these things, among many of them, I'm first. So I'm not a bad sacrifice among many things. Or among many, I am the middlemost. But certainly I'm never the last. So I'm a fairly good sacrifice, you know. I'm not as bad as those cows. Right? And so he's measuring himself. What purpose of the king of death will my father serve today by thus giving me away to him? You know, it's like, well, what is the point of all of this? And what is the advantage? What is my father going to get? And what is the king of death going to get by accepting me as a sacrifice, you know, from my father? And so it goes on. It takes we watch our brother Nachiketas go off to the land or the realm of Yama, right, as a Brahmin, and we get a couple of verses here that talks about sets up our situation for being in the presence of the King of Death. It says, "Verily, like a fire, a Brahmin guest enters a house. The householder pacifies him by giving him water and a seat. Bring him water, O King of Death." So this is the narrator yelling in from the side of the stage. You've got a Brahmin, a spiritual seeker, that's sitting in your waiting room, and you bring him water, bring him a gift, bring him something. It says, "The Brahmin who dwells in a house fasting, if you don't give him something to drink or eat, he will destroy that foolish householder's hopes and expectations, the reward of his intercourse with pious people, the merit of his kindly speech, the good results of his sacrifices, and his beneficial deeds, and his cattle and children as well." So it's setting up a real situation here. Nachiketa shows up in the land of Yama, sitting in his waiting room. He has to wait there 3 days. The King of Death has not come home, as it were, for 3 days. And Yama says, "O Brahman, salutations to you. You are a venerable guest and have dwelt in my house for 3 nights without eating. Therefore choose now 3 boons, 1 for each night, O Brahman. May all be well with me." Now, this struck me in quite a beautiful way when I read this for the first time, because I thought, well, where is the land of Yama? Where did he go, to sit in Yama's waiting room? And I thought, well, he didn't go anywhere. We're in the land of death. Every single person here and now will bow their knee to death. There's nobody that overcomes death here. And certainly all of us are in his waiting room, right? We're all sitting here. When are we going to go? When is the day here? So Nachiketas doesn't go somewhere supernatural to see death. In his state of being filled with Shraddha, being filled with this knowledge, this faith in the reality of what is, he recognizes himself sitting in Yama's waiting room. And Yama now gives him 3 boons, right? Now this is kind of interesting to me, because if death gives you a boon, let's pretend it's you, Jyoti. Death comes in and says, "Okay, it's your turn, but I'll give you a boon." What's your first boon going to be?
I don't know.
Don't overthink it.
Peace on earth.
Well, that's very noble, but you don't think you'd say, "Don't take me"?
No.
That wouldn't be your first boon with
no.
from. Okay, well, next, maybe a normal person. Right? So he says, Nachiketas said, "O death, my Gautama, my father, may he be calm and cheerful and free from anger toward me." Right? So that's one of our first desires. We run into death. He's going to take us. Well, don't let anybody feel ill of me. May everybody say nice things at my funeral. May all be well, he says. May everybody be calm and cheerful and free from anger toward me. May he recognize me, right, and greet me when I shall have been sent home by you, right? So don't take me. So my first boon, I'm going to actually ask for 2 things and disguise them as 1. I want everybody to think well of me, because that's all of us want. We want them to think well and have good memories of our being here. And then I don't want to go. So may they recognize and be happy with me when I get back to see them all. This I choose as my first of the 3 boons. And Yama says, "Okay, through my favor, your father will recognize you and will be again toward you as he was before. After having seen you freed from the jaws of death, he will sleep peacefully at night and bear no anger against you." So he gives him his first boon, right? He allows him those 2 things. Nachiketas said, "In the heavenly world, there is no fear whatsoever. You, O death, are not there, and no one is afraid of old age. Leaving behind both hunger and thirst, and out of the reach of sorrow, all rejoice in heaven. You know, O death, the fire sacrifice which leads to heaven. Explain it to me, for I am full of faith. The inhabitants of heaven attain immortality. This I ask for my second boon. Right? So he wants to know. It's like, how do I escape suffering? You know, how do I find some place where there is no fear? How do I get to this heaven? You know this fire sacrifice, teach that to me. And Yama says, I know well the fire sacrifice which leads to heaven, and I will explain it to you. Listen to me. Know this fire to be the means of attaining heaven. It is the support of the universe. It is hidden in the hearts of the wise. Right? Yama then told him about the fire, which is the source of the worlds, and what bricks were to be gathered for the altar, and how many, and how the sacrificial fire was to be lighted. Nachiketa too repeated all of this as it had been told to him, and then Yama, being pleased with him, spoke again. High-souled Death, being well pleased, said to Nachiketa, I will now give you another boon. This fire shall be named after you. Take also from me this many-colored chain. Right, now this, let my imagination play with this one a little bit as I was sitting there trying to figure out what's going on here. He gives him his boon, but he's talking about this fire, right? That of this sacrifice. And I thought to myself, okay, well, we've got Nachiketas. He's sitting in this room, in death's waiting room. So he's sitting here in this life. He's gotten his first boon. He's asking the second one about how to escape death, how to enter into immortality. And now Death is telling him about a fire, and he tells him about this fire for this sacrifice. He says there's a few things in here. He says, one, it's the support of the whole universe, this fire, and it's hidden in the hearts of the wise, right? So it's something within us. And this idea of him naming this sacrifice after Nachiketas, I took that as a hint that this sacrifice bears all of our name. That this is also my sacrifice. And this fire that dwells in me is that fire, the Virat, the isness, the Satchitananda, really, that fire that's within me. And this body is a temple. And that fire burns within me, and everything that I eat, everything that I take in through my senses, everything that I read or hear or expose myself to, is thrown onto that fire. Right? All the food that you eat at night goes straight onto the altar. Right? Goes right down there, gets burned in that fire for digestion, and that fire, that divine self that is expressing itself through all of us, that one self that's expressing in all of us, is the acceptor of all of this sacrifice, everything that you're doing in a day, everything that you're thinking in a day. And that you put all of that, and then the life that comes from that is the prayers, really, that come off of that shrine, the intentions that come off of that shrine, the results or the things you were looking for in your sacrifice. And so you, with your name, are an altar. We know that from the Rig Veda, that the body is the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells within the heart. And we know from Thakur that that's the drawing room, that's where we meet the divine, that's where we go to worship. And so that is the original temple. And this building here that we've constructed is merely an external manifestation of our internal reality, right? And so everything that we offer in our life goes to the divine, is offered to the divine, and we get the results of that sacrifice. We get the results of that karma. So we know it to be the support of the universe because it is actually you that creates the universe that you live in, right? We talked about that a little bit this morning, in the sense that we don't live in a material world as we often think we do. We live in a dream, right? We live in the mind of the divine. And I gave that example this morning of how can you know that? And we talked about the fact that when you look at that light there, that light never reaches your brain. Your brain never sees that light. That light stops at the back of your eye socket when it hits the cones and rods in the back of your eye and then gets encoded into information, biochemical information. Then that goes to the mind. And what does the mind do with that? It creates a symbol from that information. And that symbol is what you get to see. You will never get to see that actual light. You will never know what that actual light looks like. And just for fun, you will not ever know whether my example of that light is the same as your symbol for that light. We have no way of verifying this. We have no way of verifying that that comes from outside of us, that there's an external world that we're reading, because we have no information about where that nerve information is coming from. You say, oh, it's coming from my eye. But then I'll tell you that your eye is just as much a symbol of the source of light as your ear is the source, the symbol for the source of sound. We don't know what's there. We don't know where it's coming from. And just like Kant said, we can never know. The thing in and of itself cannot be known, right? So we live in an independent universe that we have created. And so this is that fire, Nachiketas's fire, which bears your name within you, the source of the universe that you live in, the expression of the divine that's reflecting in your mind and creating this mind of God, or the mind of self that you are inhabiting now, right? And so then Yama told him about the fire, which is the source of the worlds, and the bricks to be gathered for the altar, and how many, and how the sacrificial fire was to be lighted. Nachiketa too repeated all of this as it had been told to him, and then Yama, being very pleased with him, spoke again. Now this was incredibly frustrating to me when I read this, because I was like, well, what an amazing question that Nachiketas is asking. You know, show me how to escape death. Show me how to escape suffering. How do I find my immortality? And you would think that would be the whole point of the Upanishad. But here in this verse where he tells me everything, he doesn't tell us. Doesn't tell us at all how to do this sacrifice, doesn't tell us how many bricks, doesn't tell us how to stack them, what to do. It's like, what's going on with this? Why are we not getting the answer to this fundamental question, right? And so I thought about in life, what is this going on? And where am I at? You know, why am I not getting to do this? And it's because where he goes with this for the rest of the Upanishad. He lays out through his interaction with Nachiketas what are the requirements for dealing with the shrine that we carry within us. What things do we have to offer on that shrine in order to come to the knowledge of our immortality and of our freedom? How do we get there? And he lays it all out to him. So high-souled Death, being well pleased with Nachiketas for his diligence and his paying attention, says to him, I will now give you another boon. This fire shall be named after you. Take also from me this many-colored chain. Now, this many-colored chain, the commentators went on about the different forms of karma that this represented. But I like a little bit more of a more rudimentary, a simple explanation of that, and that death gave him a reminder of himself. You know, because it says here, in just a moment, Nachiketa says to him, it says, for there is no greater teacher than you, right? And Vivekananda tells us that all monks, he says monks in particular, because he didn't want to be morose for householders, but he said you should every day think about your death. Every day you should contemplate death. You should think about it, because it will teach you what's important in your life, and it will keep you from running after the things that aren't important in your life. And so I saw this many-colored chain as just being a gift from death to Nachiketas, brightly colored, always there, always getting his attention, always reminding him of this visit and of the things that he's learned at this time. And so to take that and to remember death is a measure for your life, and that thinking about it is a very important thing. You know, it's one of the things, I took Vivekananda rather seriously on that. And quite often in the evenings when I'm laying in my bed, I imagine, just for the exercise, that it's my deathbed. And I sit there and I think, okay, Swami, see, you're never going to get up from here. This is it until the lights go out. Are you okay with that? I ask myself, you know, I sit there and I think, do I have a space inside me that I can take refuge where I don't need to get out of this bed again? Do I have a space inside me that's joyful, a space inside me that's light, that's beautiful, that I can come and sit in and be content to watch the body go from here. And then I try and withdraw myself into that place. And I try to observe the body. I listen to the heart. I hear my breath. And I imagine all of that stopping. What would it be like? Absolute silence. No hum of my blood. No tick, tick, tick of the heart. But watch that slowly stop. And the mind, that noisy, shiny, buzzy thing that has nagged me my entire life, suddenly begins to dim. And this whole universe that I've created in the senses and in the mind begins to fade out. Do I know where I am still? Do I know what I am still? As all of the external forms of attributes and measurements and limitations and boundaries disappears, do I still know me? Am I still familiar with the I am when I have no memories telling me a story of my ego? When I have no relatives putting me in my place in the world, when I have no hope of a future, nothing to build on, no desires to have, when all of the things that I have identified myself by and with silence themselves, am I okay? Am I all right? And so I lay there in bed at night and I think this as an exercise before I go to sleep, not every night, but many of them, to remember that this is exactly what will happen one day. There will come a day where I lay down in my bed and where I won't get up again. And there will come a day when everything that defines me disappears. You know, I'm at that age right now. I just turned 60 and I'm 4 or 5 years younger than almost all my friends. And so they're all retiring officially. And my friend Philip retired from teaching high school and said something quite surprising to me a few months after his retirement. He said to me, you know, I had no idea that this was going to be such a huge change for me. He says, you know, my whole life, my whole adult life, the last 45 years of my life, I've been a teacher every day, all day. Everybody treats me that way. Everybody talks to me that way. And he says, for the last 3 months, I feel like I'm nothing. Nobody knows me. Nobody cares what I have to say. Nobody's asking any questions. And he said that has been the most surprising, out of nowhere realization of how much identity my job gave to me. You know, and he had been a monk for 5 years in the Ramakrishna order. And I was surprised to hear that from him because I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting that that didn't occur because we don't spend time thinking about those things. But what a gift that it came to him now, you know, and not having to deal with that at the end. Because at the end, we want to be fully present, right? We want that to be the best meditation we've ever had, where we're sitting there and the name is not just a sound, it's not just a mantra, but it's the presence we finally have recognized, the fact that the mantra and God are one, that they're not two things. And we've learned the meaning of it because we've experienced the presence. We know what that is in ourselves. We've found the silence of ourself, where we know what we are in a way that won't fit into language, that doesn't have a past, present, or future, a subject, object, verb, or time, space, and causation. That there's a you that can only be described and known in that silence, right? And so Nachiketas is getting a reminder from death of this place. You've come here, you know, I'm allowing you to return, but you'll come back again. But you'll come back again with this many-colored thing around your neck, and you will know, and you will remember that this sacrifice happened on a body that was not you, in a mind that was not you, and that this will show you and help you to remember always what you are. As all of your attributes disappear, I am will be enough. And the I am is the reality, the only thing that we ever know that depends on nothing else that we know. So to come to that 0 point. So take this necklace that we're being given right now and place it around your neck, and don't forget. Think about your death and don't be afraid of it. because it's a beautiful part of life. It's a freedom, it's an expansion. You know, if you read these near-death experiences, none of them talk about a contraction. One of the most beautiful ones that I read talked about somebody that they were told they were going to have to come back again, back into the body again, that they weren't going to be able to stay dead. And they said that they were so terribly disappointed because they knew all of the things that they knew when they weren't in the body would not fit into the mind when they returned, and how deeply they were going to miss all that they learned when they left the body, all of the knowledge that they had that couldn't fit into a mind. You know, they would be aware of that. All right, so death is giving him another boon, this colored chain to wear around his neck. And he says, he who has performed 3 times this Nachiketas sacrifice, having been instructed by the 3, and also has performed his 3 duties, overcomes birth and death, having known this fire born of Brahman, omniscient, luminous, and adorable, and realized it, he attains supreme peace. All right, so he who has performed 3 times this sacrifice, and I really didn't have a clue what they were talking about with all of these 3s, and so I went and borrowed from the commentators. He says that really this doing it 3 times means a perfection of it, you know, that it's been done, you're possessed of its knowledge, you've studied it, and you've performed it. So know that you've completed the triad. You've done this thing perfectly. So he who has performed this 3 times, this Nachiketa sacrifice, having been instructed by the 3, right? And according to the 3, it's the 3 sources of knowledge, right? But there's several versions of the 3 sources of knowledge. One of them is mother, father, and teacher, right? So if you've been instructed by those 3 traditional forms of teaching, or the second group of 3 is the Vedas, the Smritis, and good people, holy people. So you've been trained by those 3. And then there's a third one, direct perception, inference, and scripture is your third set. So you get 3 sets of 3 things to be taught for. So if you've been taught by these 3 things, you've perfected this sacrifice, you've learned how to live, you've learned how to be choosy about what you offer into this body to the Lord, and you've been careful of its prayers and the things that it indicates, and also has performed your 3 duties, right? And what are these 3 duties? He says, the commentator says that our 3 duties are sacrifice, study of the Vedas, and charity. And so sacrifice was an interesting one, that there would be the sacrifice in the middle of a sacrifice happening. But that's exactly what we ultimately have to offer on this shrine that is within us. We have to place our ego there, that which we think we are, the thought of ourself. And that's the hardest thing for us to offer, one, because we have to separate ourselves from the thought of ourself, right? And what am I meaning by the thought of ourself? You see, we're attached. And what does attached means? It means that we think that we exist in our mind. That's why we think that our thoughts are about us. That's why we think our thoughts are from us and to us. We don't see them as being unrelated to us because we're attached to them. And how do we attach to them if we are the container of all of them? It's because we produce a thought of ourself, and we place that thought of ourself in the mind. We place that thought of ourself in this, so that this is no longer a projection. It's ourself, because we've placed ourself in the middle of this. And to do that, we had to give boundaries to ourselves, and that is what your ego is. Your ego is your set of limitations and restrictions that you have owned, that you have identified with and said, this is who I am and what I am. And from that set of limitations and restrictions are born all of your desires, born all of your dreams, all of your stories that explain the moment to you, right? And so we have to place all of those things on the shrine of the heart. We have to give up this thought of me. We have to give up our thoughts about me. We have to give up all of these attributes, these restrictions and limitations that form a personality. You know, Vivekananda said, he said, this personality that you love so much, It's just a bundle of restrictions and limitations. There's nothing else to it. Your likes and dislikes are just a description of limitations, boundaries. The thing in you that gets annoyed is the boundary of your ego. The thing in you that keeps track of your karma is your ego, your sense of separateness. It's the way that you stay in control, the way that you stay in charge, in the light of an infinite amount of information telling you that you're not in charge, that you're not in control, right? And you can see that if you start observing. The one fundamental thing in our spiritual life is this observation, this constant discernment. You should be inside watching everything that happens all the time. Otherwise, you play the fool. These things are all happening inside of you and you're never seeing them. Desires, we talked a little bit about it this morning. According to Sri Nisargadatta, what is a desire? He said a desire is a memory, that's tied, that's brought up by an impulse, by something in through the senses comes in, touches a memory, that memory arises, and on top of that memory, the mind places expectation, an expectation of a replay, an expectation of the pleasure that was brought up in memory from that. And see, once that desire is fully formed, to fight it is rather difficult, right? It's become a full thing. And if you wait even longer, that memory of pleasure pulls up several fantasies, several other memories, few possibilities about the future of how to go about it and how to get it, right? And then we go to war. Forget it. You're living in a state of mind. You won't be able to overcome that. And all of us know that state. We all see that we can't overcome these things. Why? Because we weren't there for their formation. We weren't watching the mind to see when I touched a piece of fur, and that softness on my fingers brought up a memory of something else, and then that memory played the pleasurable part, because the memories never play the unpleasurable part. That's the thing. They only play the pleasurable part, and it just keeps nagging you with that loop until you give in, if you don't have the wherewithal to say no, right? When we fight those desires, that's the thing. If you go to battle with your desires, you're going to lose. And you want to lose. That's why you went to battle. And you say, how's that possible? Well, there's only one person in you. There's only one person in there. If that person says no, who's going to argue? Right? Nobody's going to argue. So if you go to battle, who are you going to battle with? You're going to battle with a thought of yourself, right? With something separate from you. And that self is going to battle just long enough for you to feel like you've given it a good enough effort. I made a valiant effort and I lost. Well, next time I hope I'm successful. But now you get away with it, right? Because you've given that power over. You've divided yourself. Anytime you have an attachment, you create a new being in your mind. Someone who can argue with you. Somebody who can think differently than you. Someone who will converse with you. Because when you identify with something, when you attach to something, you give it your sense of self. You give it a copy of your Satchitananda. So it takes on an intelligence. It can argue with you about why you should have that fifth piece of cake. It can tell you how that's such a small thing. God doesn't care about that stuff. That's nonsense. So it has a sense of intelligence. It has a sense of love, of attraction, to manipulate you, to keep bringing you back to that thought again and again, right? So when you identify with something, and I like to think this is just an explorative thought that I'm still arguing with in my head, but if we're living in a mind, right, when we dream at night, you enter into your mind, right, and you choose a particular perspective, even though in that dream you're everything. You choose a particular perspective from which to observe that dream. And even though everything in that dream is your mind, it's you only think that this particular perspective is you and that everything else is other in that dream, right? Now, when God dreams, which this is what God's dream is, God has become every one of us, but he doesn't choose a particular. He has the knowledge that he is each and every one of us, right? So God, and I'm just playing with this. Share with me what you think about it, though, later afterwards. this notion that you are a thought in the mind of the beloved, and he's attached to you. He likes you as a thought, and so has imbued you with his sense of Satchitananda, has given you sentience, has given you love, has given you existence, right? Based on that attachment to you. And why would he be attached to you? Because you're a story about him, or about her, as it were. You are a story of love. Your life is the story of everything you've wanted, everything you've longed for, everything that you thought was something that you loved, that you wanted to have. And so if you take every one of our lives, each one of us is a single story of love in a compendium of encyclopedias that look at love expressed through endless numbers of limitations and restrictions. So God started you by thinking, I wonder what I would look like if I was a computer scientist born and raised, in Atlanta, and went to a Vedanta center and, got married and did this, that, and the other. What do I look like when I'm pressed through that form, when I'm expressed through that set of limitations and restrictions? And what about this set of limitations and restrictions? And what about this one? And what about that one? Until he's populated a world with 7 billion experiments of what pure love, pure Satchitananda looks like when pressed through a mind with these limitations and these restrictions. So, and when you've finished, when he sees, at the end of your life, what you've looked like, he detaches, and the thought disappears, merges back into the mind, into the oneness, into Brahman, loses all of its identity, gives it all up. And so in that sense, we've got Nachiketas here, performing this sacrifice, coming to this understanding of himself, and being willing to place himself on that altar, that ego self, that self of the thought of me in this thought of a world, right? So he says, this, O Nachiketa, is your fire sacrifice, which leads to heaven, and which you have chosen as your second boon. People will call this fire by your name. Now, O Nachiketa, choose the third boon. And Nachiketa says, there is a doubt about man. There is this doubt about a man when he is dead. Some say that he exists, others say that he does not. This I should like to know, taught by you. This is the third of my boons. So his second boon was just that being free from death, losing the idea of mortality. This one, he's asking a much more subtle thing. What am I? After this, when I lay on that deathbed and I watch the lights of my body go out one by one and hear the noises stop and the silence rise, and then my thoughts begin to dim, my memories begin to gray, and that silence begins to descend upon me. Who am I when nothing is telling me anymore? When nothing is describing me anymore? Who am I? And Yama says, on this subject even the gods formerly had their doubts. It is not easy to understand. The nature of Atman is subtle. Choose another boon, O Nachiketa. Do not press me. Release me from this boon. Right? So now he doesn't want to tell him this. Why? Because you can't be told this. You can't be told what you are. Right? You can only know what you are in that silence when nothing is telling you. And you only know it because you are it. But there is no way that it can be expressed. Because we talked about that this morning a little bit. It doesn't fit into any of the triads. Right? Your mind, in order to conceive of something, needs a triad. And there's 3 of them that I've sussed out so far. If you know another one, I'd be very interested. Right? What are the triads of the mind? Time, space, causation. Time belongs to the mind, causation and space belong to mind. So nothing in and of itself has anything to do with time, space, and causation. The mind projects that onto a thing in order to conceive of it, in order to understand it. Subject, object, verb, right? That's the reason God can't tell you in language what you are. That's why they can't write it down in the scriptures. This is what you are. Because there is no subject, object, verb, right? Because realization is what? It's a singularity when that triad collapses. When the subject, object, and verb are one. They're no longer separate. So your mind cannot conceive of a singularity because it needs a triad, right? And the third triad is past, present, and future. It needs the story of ego. It needs the thought of me in order to exist, in order to be described, in order to be known in the secular sense, in the mind sense. So the reason that we have to do all of this practice, and the reason we have to put our ego on the altar and give up all of our limitations and restrictions that we've identified with and held on to, is so that we can achieve that silence which happens just before death, just before the body goes, when the mind has finally silenced for the first time, and when the body silences for the final time. In that stillness, if you're not in a state of panic, right? If you've done your practice and you've prepared yourself to watch the body go, and knowing that you're not dying, that the body is going, then you escape that panic and that fear, and you can sit there in that silence. And what you'll see more than the quieting of the mind and the quieting of the body will be the rising of the knowledge of self. You will know what you are when everything has ceased to tell you. When there's nothing to distract you, there's no particular to limit you. At that point, you come into that divine knowledge of who you are. And if you've done your practice, you've unhitched your horses so that nothing is tying you down, nothing's attaching you to your ignorance, then you can leave this world laughing, right? Sri Nisargadatta says, when he talks about the differences between an enlightened soul and a deluded soul, one of those differences is that when the deluded soul leaves this world, he leaves weeping because he thinks he's losing something. He thinks he's leaving something behind. But he says the enlightened soul leaves this world laughing because he got the joke long ago and knew that he couldn't ever be caught here and stuck here. Right? So this is our choice. And this sacrifice of Nachiketas is the way of coming to this knowledge, laying yourself on the shrine of your heart, letting go of all the things that you've attached to, all the miscellaneous things you thought you were. See the nature of this world. Everything here passes. It's a continual flow of unrepeated change. There's nothing to get here. Face that truth. Accept that truth. Be fearless in your acceptance of that truth. Be relentless in your effort to know that sense, that reality, and learn to be comfortable with it. Learn to be free in it, so that you can have this same opportunity that he's going to give here. Yama says, choose something else besides this knowledge of who you are, because I can't tell you. It's very subtle, right? Which means it can't be described in thought. It can't be described in mind. It can't be placed as a concept within you. Ask me something different, right? And Nachiketa said, "Oh, death, even the gods have their doubts about this subject, and you have declared it to be not easy to understand. But another teacher like you cannot be found, and surely no other boon is comparable to this." Right? So he sees the value of this knowledge, and he knows that death is the greatest teacher. This is why Vivekananda tells you, think of death every day. It is your greatest teacher. It will not allow you to attach to things that have an expiration date. Right? If you think about death every day, it's going to teach you something. And the major thing it's going to teach you is that the only thing that you can get in this world is a bucket of potting soil. That's all that there is here. Your wife, your daughter, your sons, your cars, your houses, they're all going to fit in a bucket one day. All of them are going to be potting soil. Everything reduces to potting soil. If potting soil is what you're after, this world is for you. You can have as much of it as you like, but then you're going to have to leave all your buckets behind. So this is that knowledge that we have to have as we face this reality of the disappearing world, this world that goes away.
What did you say? Bucket of?
What's that? A bucket of potting soil.
Dirt.
Potting soil.
Potting soil, yeah, like you buy at Home Depot in the gardening department. That's the only thing that we can have here. Everything reverts back to that. No matter how beautiful she was when you met her, ultimately she's either going to end up in a bucket of potting soil or a bag of ashes. But that can be potting soil too. So in that sense, so it's about facing these truths, about letting go of your ideas of who you are that require deceit, that require a dishonesty, require a blindness. And so this is what death is trying not to tell Nachiketa, saying, oh, no, you don't want that. Why? Because there's no way for him to tell him except to show him, which would be his enlightenment, which would be his freedom, and death would have no more power, would no longer rule over him. And so Yama says to him, and we'll stop after this. He says, Yama says, choose sons and grandsons who shall live 100 years. Choose elephants, horses, herds of cattle and gold. Choose a vast domain on earth. Live here as many years as you desire. If you deem any other boon equal to that, choose it. Choose wealth and long life. Be the king, Nachiketa, of this wide earth. I will make you the enjoyer of all desires. Whatever desires are difficult to satisfy in this world of mortals, choose them as you wish. These fair maidens with their chariots and musical instruments, men cannot obtain them. I will give them to you, and they shall wait upon you, but do not ask me about death. Right? And so what we see here is exactly what we're experiencing, and many of us are failing the test. You're sitting in the waiting room of death. And you're asking this very evening, it's the only reason you would come to a lecture like this. Who am I? What is the secret of immortality? What is the secret of my being? And what is death offering you? What did he offer you today? You know, did you exchange it for it? Did you give up the knowledge of who you are for a new car, for a better job, for a pretty wife, for 2 houses, for a vacation? You know, these are the things that death is distracting you with. He's saying, no, don't ask me. No, don't worry about who you are. Take this. Come home to this beautiful home. I'll give you wives. You want a prettier one? Oh, I can give you a prettier one, right? So all these things death is offering you. And as long as we remain unenlightened, it's because we're buying. We're taking the offer instead of the knowledge. And so we have to come to a place like Nachiketa's, because right here he says very clearly, Nachiketa said, O death, these things endure only until tomorrow. Furthermore, they exhaust the vigor of the senses and of all the sense organs. Even the longest life is short indeed on the last day. Keep your horses, keep your dances, keep your songs for yourself. Right? So this has got to be your renunciation. That's what Ramakrishna says. He says, all that's necessary is one grand renunciation. And you just saw it in the words of Nachiketas. Just telling the truth. It's not that big of a deal. It's facing the truth. Everything here has an expiration date. It's here today and gone tomorrow. There is nothing to get here, nothing to take with you. You know, I refuse it all. I want knowledge. And so here in death's waiting room tonight, that's your task. Come to a place where you can withstand the test that Nachiketas is withstanding, so that when your desires are offered to you later tonight, tomorrow morning, whenever they show up, you can sit there and look at them and say, everything is expired. There's nothing to take from here. I am full and complete in myself. You know, the whole universe comes out of me. There's nothing. And tell death to its face, I don't want anything else. I want the knowledge of who I am. I want to be free. And stick to your guns. And that takes us to verse 26 of our Katha Upanishad. All right. Any questions or concerns? Corrections? Yes, sir.
Just a comment. Nachiketa reminds me what Ramakrishna said about being
Sean,
guileless.
could you come up here so that the people can hear you that are online, so they can hear the question?
It's not a question, it's a comment. Nachiketa reminds me of the guilelessness that Sri Ramakrishna always talks about. Yeah.
Yeah, guileless and firm in his discernment. Discernment, more and more I'm seeing at this point in my life. I'm just 60, so there's some years to go. But what I'm seeing is that discernment is fundamental to knowing who we are. You have to move inside completely and utterly. It's a full-time job. You know, discernment isn't learning one or two things a day. Discernment is becoming intimately aware with your inner world. You know inside where your body begins and where it ends. You know how it communicates with you. You know what senses it uses and how it uses them. You know mind and its moods and its stories and its tricks of egoism. And you know how it pairs with the body to bring up your desires, to be reminded of your pleasures, to be told the lies of your past, and to project a future based on those false things. And so you have to become intimately aware in there so that you can watch a desire begin to form. Before it forms, before you even know what the desire is, you see the process begin. You felt that touch, you heard that sound, you smelled that smell, So you smell that pizza, and what do? You don't let it create the desire for pizza. You simply enjoy the smell of pizza and leave it at that. Desire nothing, right? Because that pizza is what, I always tell that story because it's a wonderful example of how these things happen. I was in the monastery, just joined, was in there less than 6 months. I was taking my afternoon walk on Polk Street in San Francisco. It was a beautiful day, and I was a new monk, and I felt so full of hope and joy and excitement. And I was just walking in the sunlight thinking, what a beautiful, perfect day this is. And then I got down to around where California Street is, and there's an Escape from New York pizzeria there. And that smell of freshly cooking pepperoni pizza was wafting out of that store. And I was like, God, it's been a long time since I've had pepperoni pizza. Because the monastery is vegetarian, and all I've had is dal and rice for 6 months. Right, and so it smelled really good, and I thought, oof, boy, I really would love to have a piece of that pizza, right? So what happened? I smelled that piece of pizza, and what did that do? It brought up the memory of eating pizza, pepperoni pizza. It showed me my attachment to that taste and to that enjoyment, and put on top of that desire an expectation of doing that again, right? So that's my past. My past was my attachments. Right? The current sensation pulled up an attachment from my past, plays it in my mind. Now what's happening? I have to find a way of manifesting pizza in my present. What do I need to do that? I need a future. So my mind creates a future, a path of possibility for bringing that pizza into my moment when I realize, Christmas, Swami gave me a Christmas card. It had $20 in it. That's still in my top desk drawer in my room back at the monastery. I have a means of getting pizza, manifesting pizza. So what do? I walk to the monastery, I get that $20 out of my card in the top drawer, and I walk back down to California and Polk Street to buy a piece of pizza. And I eat that piece of pizza, and what do I think? Now the day is perfect. I've had my pizza. And what's the fallacy in that? What was I thinking before I smelled the pizza?
The day was perfect.
What a perfect day. What a perfect day this is. And so then the sensation comes along, the smell comes along, ties me into my memory, creates a sense of lack in the moment. For that sense of lack, I create a future for how to repair it. I employ that future, and I deepen the lie by blaming the perfect day on the acquired object, forgetting that the day was already perfect. And where do we see that story? That story is in the book of Genesis. That is the story of Eve in the Garden of Eden. She's already like God. She's in the company of the beloved in paradise. And she looks at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is just the tree of egoism. That's the only way we get the knowledge of good and evil, is to have a sense of separation from God. So now there's evil, and we know what it is, and we know what good is. So that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and she does 3 steps. The first one, she looked at the fruit. She thought it was beautiful, right? She saw that it was beautiful. She smelled that pizza. I love that smell, right? And then the second thing came along. She said it looked like it would be good for food. She wanted it, wanted to take it, to grab it, to attach to it. So she looks at the beauty, gets enthralled by the beauty, takes step 2, wants to have it. And the third one, she says, it will give me wisdom and make me like God. It's going to make me whole. It's going to fill the lack of the moment, right? And so she takes and she eats. And then, of course, we see the curse develop from that, the sense of smallness, the sense of separation, the fear of God, all of those things. And then the curse of, if you're going to live in your senses, having them remind you of pleasures and go chasing them all the time, you're going to be tilling at the dust of the earth all the days of your life, right? And what are we doing? How many hours did you go to work today? For what? To fill the hours of desire that you've got. The house you live in, the car you drive, the wife you have, the children you bear. All of these things you go to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day to pay for. You're living the curse because you've stepped into your senses, identified yourself with them, created a sense of self that was empty and lacking, and now you're depending on a future to fulfill it with things of the senses, which cannot last, which are short indeed on the last day, right? And so we get stuck. Don't do it. I'm going on and on here.
We have a question online.
Yes.
Go ahead, Swami.
Yes, Namaste, Swami. This is a question that I've asked before and I've contemplated on too, but I'd like to hear from you again and help me contemplate. Sometimes I think it's easier to detach from the things that you want rather than the things you don't want, like not having pain, not seeing somebody else suffer. Those are harder to detach from.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on that and how to do that?
Well, to say it's difficult to detach is a story. Because there's only one person in you and all you have to do is say no. So it's not a difficult thing to do, and one type of attachment is not different from another type of attachment. They are the same thing, just approached from different ends. And so it's not in a matter of difficulty, it's in a matter of discernment. We have to love truth more than anything else, and we don't. We like our sense of self, the thought of self. We like our ego self. We enjoy chasing our pleasures. We enjoy avoiding our fears and dislikes. We wouldn't know what to do without them. That's how we've defined ourselves. So the story has to go deeper than that. You have to come to know that you are enough. You have to come to experience yourself as enough. And how do we get that? We get that by facing the fact that this moment is always perfect. God is everywhere present and always perfect. That knowledge will lead you to yourself. Why? Because this moment is very rarely perfect for a body. Very rarely perfect for a body. And yet, Mother says it's perfect. So you're going to have to sit there and figure out, how is this moment that seems imperfect to my body perfect? I must not be a body. The moment is very rarely perfect for a mind. Very rarely is your mind content in the moment. And so you have to look deeper inside. But the truth of the matter is, this moment is perfect, right? And so you have to eventually come to this understanding, I'm not a body, I'm not a mind. They experience the moment as imperfect. What am I? And then you come to find that in fact you are the moment. And in the moment there is no story, right? There's no room for a story in the moment. The moment before you even know it's here is gone, in one way of thinking, right? So there's no room for a story. So you have to silence your mind to live in the present. For you to form a thought puts you in the past. And if you're paying attention to the thought, you're not in the moment. So the moment, which is you, which is perfect, which is your divinity, which is your immortality, which is eternity, it's always everywhere around you. Everything about you is pointing to it. But you're not paying attention to that. You're paying attention to yourself as a mind and trying to chase down something that's going to balance your bad mood. You've identified with the body, and you're looking for something that's going to take away that fluey feeling in the back of your neck, back of your throat at the moment, or your whatever it is that's ailing you. Right? So difficult? Not really. It just takes a grand renunciation to put an end to it. And that takes a lot of discernment so that we don't love the lie more than we love the truth.
Thank you.
No. Yes.
I found it interesting when you were talking about when we battle with something, we already lost.
Yes.
It's interesting how I don't know what I know, because I've been battling with food, binge eating, basically all my life. And you put into words something that I didn't realize why it was happening. And the moments when I want to eat something binge, and I say, you're not having it, that's it, and I don't give myself an alternative, I usually could do it. But once there's a debate,
Yes.
99% of the time I lost.
Yes.
And I've said that to people, but you kind of explained the why behind, because I didn't understand it. I thought it was like, when I do this, able to do it, and I'm not always able to do it, I basically succeed. But once there's that debate, once there's that word well, or just this, I'm done.
Yes.
And you kind of put that into words, so I'm going to try to implement that and see if that helps me deal with the binge eating. So thank you. I hope that works.
Yeah. No, it's the observing that's the most important thing, because it will betray that to you. It will show you that the only reason we argue is because we want to lose. And we won't tell ourselves that. We'll still fight, right? How long will you fight? You'll fight long enough to not feel guilty about losing.
That is so interesting. I really want to use that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's.
Wish me luck.
I will. I'm wishing myself luck in all those things too. Yeah, definitely. But the observation betrays all these things to us, and they're very hard to accept when you start seeing, because we believe this lie about ourselves because it allows us to feel good about ourselves, to exist in our ignorance and be content in it, right? And it's hard when you start seeing, wow, that sucks.
Yeah, I'm gonna lose.
Yeah, I set myself up.
Yeah.
I set myself up to lose, and it gets so subtle. Desires, they begin long before we're aware of them. I find it one of the dangerous things for me is just something as simple as YouTube. It's like YouTube is a gateway drug. It's like, oh, look at that. Oh, it's just YouTube. That's no big deal. But then it puts your mind into a state. You start thinking about those things, right? And then you go to a second source that's a little bit more direct about what it's offering you, right? And then you take another little baby step, and then another little baby step. So it always starts with innocuous things that are no big deal, always. But you give yourself permission to do them because they're no big deal, not because they're the right thing to do, but because they're not a big deal, right? And little by little, you're getting yourself comfortable with the fall. You're getting yourself comfortable with the loss. And if you can be diligent in your observation, in your discernment, you will see that happen. And it's a lot easier to say no at that point before the desire has formed, before the whole state of mind has come about. At that point, you can win. You can say, oh, there it is. No, absolutely not. And, at that point, it's best just to get completely out of the situation. Get up and walk to the coffee house and get a coffee, or go take a walk around the block, or pull out the scriptures, or go sit in the shrine. The shrine's a tough one, though, because a lot of times the mind will keep putting it up there. If you go to the mind to meditate, or go to the shrine to meditate, and you're in a state of desire, it depends. At some point, it's a perfect thing to do, because you've touched the divine enough to find reliance and to find trust and to find strength in it. If you're not at that part in your practice, going to the shrine can be the worst thing that you can do, because you're putting it in there, and the mind is just going to replay it and replay it and replay it and nag you and bring it up again and again, because you haven't quite gotten to the point. You haven't quite touched the things you're relying on by running to the shrine. So it's better if, in the beginning, to run to the scripture, to sing a song, to start your japam somewhere or whatnot. But get something that takes you completely out of that space, away from the computer, away from the phone, away from whatever it is that was causing or beginning your compromise. But you see, this is that thing. To do that, you have to really want it. You really have to want to be free. And that comes again down to discernment. Looking very carefully, because, I never like talking about these examples because it takes our mind someplace. But, I remember my days in the world, and I remember on Friday night going out to a club and drinking and getting quite drunk. And the next morning waking up at 10:30, 11 in the morning, and I'm like, oh God. And I would roll over with that headache and that horrible feeling and the realization I've already slept through half of my day off. I don't get to have brunch with my friends and all this stuff. And I hear myself say, oh my God, I'm never going to do that again. Right? And next Friday night, where am I? I'm right back out there doing it again. Why? Because in my discernment, I didn't replay the whole tape. I only replayed the pleasurable part. I only remembered the beginning when I started drinking with my friends. And I just keep playing that over and over and over again. I don't play the tape that reminds me of the morning and reminds me how I lost almost a whole day to that, and how awful I felt, and how I swore I wasn't going to do it again. So in your discernment, that's one of the things that's very helpful. Widen the boundaries of your discernment. Don't just look at the thing itself. Open it up to where the results of the thing itself are also brought into view. And become intimately aware of them and say, look, a choice to enjoy a drink is a choice to lose your Saturday and to have a headache and feel icky, for the day. And that's if you're in the lucky portion of that discernment, because those contraindicatives can get serious if you don't let go. Oh, look, I've lost another wife. Oh, look, another child. My other child won't talk to me anymore. And it just keeps going like that. So discernment, fundamental.
And that lady who asked, which I thought was an interesting question, not just desiring what you want, but desiring what you don't want. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, specifically with, I don't usually battle stuff like this, but in the past 2 days, I've really been thrown off with Ukraine. It's really, and I don't usually get thrown off, but thrown off to the point of nausea, of what's going on there. Can you sort of walk through the story and the acceptance? How would that apply? How would I go through applying that with something like that? It's a story and just as sort of an example of how to, a few steps of how to start.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, what do you expect to do about that? Second of all, how do you know what you know about that? Start with your discernment there. It's like, go ahead, give yourself permission, get as upset as you want, run around the house, scream, and burn your garage down. What are you going to do? Mother has not given that to you to be concerned with. And it's all based on a story that has been gone through how many layers of story before it got to you. who knows what happened in those meetings? Who knows what was said to who? Who knows what the history is that's going on behind the political doors that I have no access to? So come to the understanding, look, that's a story. And I can believe that story in any number of ways that I want to believe it, right? Or I can bring my mind down to the size of the world that Mother has given me to control, right? When I was in the monastery in San Francisco, my friend, not really was a devotee, Katha Swami, some of you might have met him, but Katha Swami was there, and he had the grand opportunity to listen to me rant about all the stupid decisions Swami Prabhupada was making from my brahmachari perspective at that time. For 20 minutes I ranted on about it. And at the end of that 20 minutes, after I was all red in the face and just so frustrated with everything, Katha Swami finally gets an opportunity to say something, and he turns to me and he says, "What do boundary disputes have to do with a farmhand?" Right? Do you get it? What do boundary disputes have to do with a farmhand? I'm working on a farm. It's not my farm. Why am I concerned about the boundary dispute that my master's having with his neighbor? Why am I getting upset about the things that do not belong to me, that I do not have the power or the control to manage or to change? And so I learned from that statement, after I got offended at that statement, to bring my world down to the size of the world that Mother has given me. And it changed everything for me. I was like, what is it to me how Swami Prabhupada is running this monastery? I'm a farmhand. My tasks are simple. Keep it clean, weed the garden, do the worship, clean the temple. That's the world that Mother has given me to effect a change in. And Jesus says, he who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. So if you want to be responsible for Ukraine, well, do well in what Mother has given you now to be responsible for. Right now, pray to Mother and give it back to the folks who are lucky enough to get to deal with that beautiful situation, right? And you just say, look, mind, I can't that's not mine. All it can do is make me frustrated and angry, and then I'll have nowhere to express my anger, so it's going to bottle up inside me, and it's going to become this sickness in me, where I get triggered all the time, and I start hating people for something that has nothing to do with me, right? So it's discernment again, but a different type of discernment. And so I tell people that. I said, that's the problem with the modern world right now, and I can't help but suspect that it's on purpose. Get you all worked up about Ukraine, and then they can drag your neighbors off while you're not watching. Get you all excited about these things that you have no power about, so that you ignore and forget the things that you do have power about. It's like so many of us know more about what's happening in Ukraine and China than we know what our local council is voting on this week. That's a decision I can affect. That's something I'm directly responsible for. And I've allowed myself to be utterly distracted from the world that I actually can influence and can change and can control, and exchanged it for something that has nothing to do with me, that I can't control, can't do anything about, and is going to make me sick at the end of the day.
Makes sense, thank you.
Yeah.
I was thinking that when you were talking about perfect, and you were saying that, again, perfect is not for my body perfect, it is me perfect. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah.
Body perfect and me perfect?
Yes. And I won't. There's not going to be much in there that's going to change any of it. But it's just that notion. One time Swami Arapeshananda, who he and I took sannyas together, his mother was dying in the hospital at one point, and every time I saw him that day around the monastery, he was chanting something the entire day. And so after like the third or fourth time that I passed him and saw him chanting, I just saw his lips moving. I said, Arapesh, what are you doing? What are you I passed you like 3 times today and you're chanting the whole time. And he says, I'm just repeating to myself, that God is everywhere present and always perfect. And he says, I'm trying to remind myself that my mother in the hospital, my mother dying, me being here, that this is perfect. There's nothing wrong with this. This is life, and this is the way it happens. And I'm trying to accept that and trying to come to know that. And so, mothers are of bodies. The body's going to feel that loss. The mind's going to feel that pain, right? That doesn't mean that the situation's imperfect. That means it's uncomfortable to the body. It's difficult for the mind, but it doesn't mean that it's not perfect. This is the nature of things. This is the way it is. And so accepting that, the only way to do that is to remember who you are. This is the mind of God. There's nothing that I can take from this world. If my mother didn't die today, she would die tomorrow. And if she didn't die, I would die. I have to accept this and know who I am, that this has nothing to do with me, and you can use whatever means you want to do that kind of discernment. But the self is always content. It's part of what you learn when you start going into the interior world and identifying body, identifying mind, identifying their relationship with each other. One of the things you notice is that your desires never arise from the observer. They always arise from the observed. So it's always the mind that creates desire. It's always the body that creates desire. But the observing self, the witness, never creates a desire. It's perfect. And it feels that perfection. It feels that innate contentment in itself, right? But it's only through its attachment to mind, attachment to body, that it then takes on the imperfection, the problem, and identifies with that problem, and then requires the whole little loop that we talked about, the 3-step loop: seeing it beautiful, desiring it to be a part of you, taking it, thinking it will make you whole. And so that's that whole notion. It's like, become intimately aware of yourself as the observer. Become intimately aware of where your desires come from, how they form. And then just through observation, you realize, God, that has nothing to do with me. I, the observer, have been doing this for millions of years. I'm not bored. I'm not tired. I'm not finished. I just am. And everything is in the bowl, but nothing is touching me. I am the container of all of this, of every possibility. And so to live in that space is to find perfection. And then you can leave the desires to the mind and leave them to the body. And those ones which are harmless, it will fulfill and keep going. Those ones that are dangerous, you will have learned to control and let go of and observed. But it all comes down to honest observation. Going inside, getting out of the senses, pull back from the senses a bit, and observe. Watch them. Don't try and control them at the beginning like that. Just watch them. The knowledge you gain from watching them will ultimately bring them under control.
And next one you told that it's a good practice to every day when going to bed to remember ourselves. This may be last day and what I relate to you. What needs to be practically remembered when you are every day going to bed? What's a good practice?
Well, it's just a practice. It's not a need to do it. I do it at that point.
That's okay.
But I just...
Question.
What?
When you are going to bed, what should we have a practice what Swami was talking about?
Oh, the death?
Yeah. Let's say we are maybe death is today, I may not be back tomorrow. So I have nothing to do, and what I live, what is there around me is nothing to me. So what is the good thing to think every day when I'm going to bed?
What's a good thing to think? Just follow your breath and fall asleep. That's the best thing to do. But if you're going to do a practice like the death practice that I do, I don't really go into the death part of it. I just imagine everything silencing. I imagine, do you remember Ramana Maharshi came to his realization that way? He, as a teenager, he laid on the floor and imagined his death, and he imagined his body shutting down, he imagined his mind silencing. And lucky him, I've done it a million times because I read that he got enlightenment that way. I thought, well, maybe that'll work for me too. And so I've done it for many years now. Still not there. But that notion, you know, that idea. So I would just say, you don't have to put the label death on it if you don't want to. Just put the label silence on it and let everything silence. Imagine your heart stopping and not hearing it. Imagine the breath stopping. Imagine the pain stopping. Imagine all the things that you're feeling, and then go through and feel them all independently. Put your attention on them one at a time, and withdraw your attention and feel that silence happen. And do it all the way through your body until you're just in your mind. And then start the same thing with your thoughts. Start imagining there's no noise. Start imagining there's no relationships between thoughts. And let the mind begin to silence. And you'll probably fall asleep before you finish that. You know, if you put death on it and make it a death practice, then that could be somewhat morose and bring other things up. But if you're just going to use it as a thing to go to sleep or to lay down at night, that's one way of doing it. The other thing that I do when I don't feel like doing the death thing at night is in the morning I'll get there on the front and sit on the edge of my bed, and I always stroke the covers. I have a fuzzy bedspread, and I stroke it, and I just keep reminding myself, almost like a mantra, this is the mind of God. I am in a dream, and none of this is real. This bed, not a bed. These arms, not arms. This is a mind that I am inhabiting, and it's the mind of the beloved, and its nature is love. Its nature is wisdom, and I get to experience it through being. And I soak in for a moment, just kind of frame the world as God's dream, and then try and remember that for the whole day. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
I had a lot of battles with death, and I'm not over them.
Yeah.
But I came to a point where I knew, for me, I needed to make friends with it.
Yes.
So I put myself in a dark room and just breathed. And I visualized, I actually saw a form in front of me of death. It's just a black form. I saw it or projected it, whatever. And I just started speaking to it. I said, hello. I said, I know you're going to come for me one day. Hopefully not soon. But, you know, all I ask is that I go without fear, that I wanted to make peace with you. And I've done it a few times, and I wouldn't say I'm done, but it has made for me, a big difference of making it an ally instead of an enemy.
Yes.
Making it something that, yeah, and every once in a while I'll lay in bed, just every once in a while, just the thought will come, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
So before you do, you better live. Because you know, every once in a while, just throughout the day, it's like, boom, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
So stop taking things for granted. Just start living.
I would change the language a little bit.
Okay.
Because you're not in fact going to die. Just
I mean the body.
exactly.
Yeah.
So say that.
Okay.
That brings up another lecture, but it is important.
It's 50 to this time for the next lectures.
Yeah,
is it
that's
really?
what- yeah,
Oh my
it's 9
gosh.
o'clock. That's what I was, it's 9:02.
Oh my gosh.
So everyone here, tell these people good night, and I'm gonna close this meeting.
All
Can you
right.
tell them good night?
Good night, everybody.
And we're gonna shut the meeting down.